You're listening to the Balanced Educator Podcast, episode number 159. Welcome to the Balanced Educator. We're your hosts, Kaylee
and Josiane from EduCalm. Our intention is to equip and empower you to feel more calm, balanced, and joyful in all aspects of your life.
Hello there and welcome. We are so happy to have you here with us today. So, are you looking for some simple, no-cost ways to practice mindfulness with your students and help them to manage their emotions? In this episode of the Balanced Educator Podcast, we're talking to Sandi Schwartz, the founder and director of the Ecohappiness Project, about how to mindfully engage with nature. In this episode, you'll learn the science behind why time mindfully engaging in nature is beneficial to children's emotional health. You'll also discover how to implement nature programming in your classroom in a creative way to help students better manage their emotions. And you'll walk away with tons of fun, simple nature activity ideas to add to your curriculum, whether you teach in kindergarten or grade 12. We've got lots of great ideas for you on this episode. Before we dive in, we're excited to share this week's sponsor. Do you want to incorporate social-emotional learning and mindfulness into your classroom to support students with mental health, focus, self-regulation, and emotional intelligence? With so much on your plate as a teacher, you probably just don't have time to get trained, develop resources, and teach the lessons yourself. Plus, you need time for self-care too. That's why we developed EduCalm, to support teachers like you. EduCalm is a fully bilingual English and French co-regulation program created by teachers. This program provides everything you'll need to build self-regulation, mindfulness, and social-emotional skills with your students through a 5-minute daily practice. With EduCalm, you don't have to be the expert. Just log in, press play, and participate with your students as you all prepare your minds and bodies for calm and focused teaching and learning together. Go to educalm.com to learn more and start using our free resources. Again, that's educalm.com, spelled EduCalme. All right, so today we're talking with Sandi Schwartz. Sandi is the founder and director of the Ecohappiness Project. She's the author of the parenting book, Finding Ecohappiness, Fun Nature Activities to Help Your Kids Feel Happier and Calmer, and the co-author of the children's book, Sky's Search for Ecohappiness. She's also a journalist specializing in parenting, environmental, and wellness topics. Her mission is to inspire and educate families to build a nature habit to feel happier and calmer. Hi there, Sandi. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So as our listeners probably know, because we talk about it fairly often, Josiane and I are avid nature lovers. It's something that brings so much joy into our lives and really helps us to integrate our mindfulness practice in different ways where we're not just sitting and kind of quietly practicing breathing or things like that, but actually kind of actively practicing mindfulness as we interact with nature. So we're so excited to have you on the show because you have a really cool, unique perspective about nature and how that can help us with our emotional well-being, but more particularly, really concrete activities that we can do to help our students interact or our kids interact with nature even more. So welcome to the show. Can you introduce yourself to our audience and just kind of let us know, how did life lead you to where you are today?
Yeah, so I run the Ecohappiness Project. It's essentially started out as a blog, and I also do freelance writing. So my primary goal is to research and then present the material to others, really kind of communicating the science behind how nature and mental health intersect and how nature can benefit families, children, and really all of us in a number of ways. And I got here because my worlds merged together. As a child starting in high school, there was a big moment that changed the trajectory of my life when I cleaned up a polluted river in my hometown in New Jersey in the US. And that led me to want to go study environmental studies in college. And so I was always wanting to protect the planet. But then at the same time, in the parallel, of my life is I was dealing with stress and anxiety. And so over time, I began to realize that nature could be a help to me in these struggles. And so I'm excited to, be writing about it and talking about it and to really educate and inspire families now to be able to tap into nature to help their children and themselves as parents. Parents are stressed out too, especially in these times. And that nature is one big piece of the solution for all of us and it's there, it's right, it's free, it's outside our window. And let's be sure to appreciate it and tap into it.
Yeah, totally. That is so great. I think lots of us have experienced kind of that type of trajectory where we have a moment in our life or a time in our life where we're feeling stressed, we're feeling anxious, we're feeling kind of overwhelmed by our emotions. And then it's like, okay, I need to make a change. I need to find something that can be my antidote to this feeling that I don't want to feel or give me strategies. So I love that nature became that for you. I'd love to know kind of in your own life, how did you start kind of integrating nature as a way to manage your emotions? Like, what did that look like for you?
Yes, I can remember specifically. Actually, I one of the kind of triggers of my anxiety as a young adult was going through infertility, and I know a lot of moms out there, have had that experience. And so I remember very vividly while I was waiting for the treatments to start, I was very nervous, and I would go and we actually spend our summers in New Jersey at the beach. And so I would just take these long walks on the boardwalk that runs parallel to the ocean and just have that incredible view of the water, of the horizon. And that to me was very soothing. I also have a very vivid memory of while I was getting acupuncture, again, for the infertility. And, you're laying there and, you're trying to relax. And I would have these visualizations of, holding my husband's hand and my future child's hand and dancing on the beach. So, it kind of kept popping up for me in a way that was helpful. And even today, I think once you have anxiety, it's just part of who you are. And so it is something, that I still work to, to manage. And I also say, you write the book you need. I really believe in that wholeheartedly. And the book I wrote is all about this to help other people as well. But I go back to it myself because it's filled with tools and tactics, to help with mental health and nature, through nature. So it's a really good resource for my own self. So, I tend to now go on walks a lot outside. I have my stationary bike sitting outside on my second floor balcony of our house. I try to go on bike rides. I try to get outside and that really is very helpful to me.
That's so awesome. And I feel like interacting with nature can be something kind of as you described it, that becomes sort of a routine. It doesn't have to be complicated, whereas some other things can feel daunting or overwhelming. But connecting with nature in big and small ways is something that we can integrate into our daily life without it being overly time consuming or hard to access. I love that. So you talk a little bit about kind of the science behind spending time in nature. Can we get into that and how is nature affecting us based on kind of the research?
Yes. So what's really great about this area now is the new research that's been out. Like we all kind of knew for generations that nature helps us feel better, but now the scientists are really, figuring out why and how, and they're comparing, situations like going for a walk and amongst the trees and the greenery versus a walk amongst the buildings, in a city, for example. And they're testing cortisol levels and they're really seeing a big difference between when you're staring at concrete and when you're staring at a beautiful, greenery and tree and the clouds and the sky, and really having that nature view. And so there's actually physiological changes in our bodies that they found. What's really, really interesting that I want to point out as well, since a lot of teachers are listening, is that there are lots of benefits of nature for students as well, for children, as far as not just their mental health and their emotional well-being, but their academic performance and their behavior and their focus. They're really finding that nature can help children, for example, who have ADHD. And especially if they have time, like outdoor classrooms have been very helpful, allowing these children to be able to focus better. And also classrooms, they've done testing on classrooms that have plants or that have a window view, and test scores even go up. So again, there's just something that's so soothing. And you would think that being outside might be a distraction, but it's actually the opposite. It allows the kids to focus better.
That's so cool. And like hearing that, I'm like, yeah, of course, that makes sense. That's totally all things that I have recognized in my own students and in my own classroom and in myself. We're from Canada. So in the wintertime, it's very cold and snowy, which can make it a little bit more difficult. A lot of people experience kind of the winter blues because we don't have that connection to greenery. We can go outside, we can play in the snow, and it's so important to do that. But you saying that even just having plants in the classroom has an effect, that's so cool, because that's something that we can do whether we have a window view or not, whether we have wintertime, like cold winters or not. That's a really accessible tool that we can use in our classrooms.
And really any nature element, being able to decorate the classroom. So nature art, paintings, drawings, photographs, and even the screens. Like, have you ever been to the doctor's office where they have like a nice, beach view playing in the waiting room? Yeah. I mean, they do that for a reason. I mean, the research shows that actually calms you down. So, that's something to think about as well in a classroom setting, and, getting the kids to paint the scenes of nature that they do get to see throughout the year, and then to decorate the classroom with it. I mean, and then it's a very calming reminder, no matter what the weather is outside.
I love that. That's a great mindfulness activity. And actually, now that you mentioned that, it makes me think we have a mindfulness and social emotional learning program for the classroom. It's called EduCalm. And we have daily audios for teachers and students to listen to. They're 5-minute audios that help them to practice mindfulness, coping skills as a daily routine. Now, we also have some mindful movement videos in our program, and we intentionally filmed those videos in nature. So those that use our program, you'll see myself demonstrating the movements for kids to follow along, students to follow along with. And we made sure to have greenery in the background just because we knew that made us feel good. But we've had a lot of feedback from teachers saying, we love being able to watch these videos and seeing the like summery background, especially those of us that have cold winters. It brings a bit of like joy into the classroom, just seeing that greenery. So that makes total sense. That's cool that the research shows that just seeing these things help to reduce our stress levels.
And nature also stimulates creativity and curiosity. So for the kids as well, I was just thinking when you were talking about the videos, to also include maybe just having nature sounds playing, in a classroom when it's time to do some free writing.
Yeah,
that
totally.
alone could be very not only calming, but stimulate their creativity.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's definitely a technique that I've used in classrooms, especially when I have groups that are very high energy and I have a hard time kind of settling down to really get down to work. I found that playing nature sounds in the background really seemed to have a calming effect on everyone. And the students really liked it. They really enjoyed it. So, and it was great for me too. Helped me feel more calm. That's important as a teacher, is to find ways to feel more calm during the day too.
Right.
Yeah, I love that idea. So let's talk about like getting outside, getting into nature. What are maybe some shorter activities that we could do that are kind of like low effort, high reward that we'd be able to kind of do throughout the school day?
Well, there are so many. And I would start with something as simple as when you're walking from one class to the next. So let's say it's lunchtime or gym class, and weather permitting, of course, but why don't you take the long walk outside around the building as opposed to always going down the classrooms? I mean, the hallways. I think that is an easy step that teachers can take. Now, my kids, fortunately, down in Florida, they have a school building set up where they actually get to go outside frequently between classes. But I grew up north in New Jersey, and that was not the case. But I was envisioning my elementary school building and thinking, oh yeah, we really could have spent a lot more time going from point A to point B outside. So that's something so simple to add, and what I like to call a nature habit into the school day.
That's such a great idea. And it would maybe take you, 2 extra minutes to walk your class to phys ed, but going outside first, then just walking down the hallway. And then you don't have to deal with trying to keep your students quiet in line in the hallway and not disturb the other classes. It's like, it reduces your stress levels too, because you don't have to worry about that.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's something very simple. You could, take advantage of the concept of an outdoor classroom, but it doesn't have to be something that is so formalized. It could just be literally like, okay, it's, a reading session. So we're going to go, instead of reading the book inside, we're going to go sit around in a circle outside and do that. Or it could be, while they're walking, you could be reading something to them, a poem, or of course, there's endless opportunities for science projects.
Yeah, definitely.
And, I would just put a plug in to try to focus on nature. And to, the kids really, as you know, benefit from that hands-on experience. So if you're studying something that has to do with nature, if you're studying birds, if you're studying the trees, if you're studying flowers, instead of just reading about it and looking at something on their screen or in the books, get them outside to see it. Go to the library, get out the nature related books, and then take them outside and explore them. So again, it's a more multi-sensory experience and multidisciplinary too, because nature can involve any subject area. It could be math, right?
Yeah.
They could go out collecting sticks and then learning addition and subtraction from them. So it's really
absolutely
kind of putting on that like nature hat and saying, okay, what can I do? Even if it's just, we pick 1 week, the week of Earth Day, and we say, we're going to immerse curriculum, all around nature. Or it could be something you do once a month, just kind of figuring out how to incorporate it. It benefits them in so many ways, and especially emotional and mental health.
Yeah, totally. And I like that idea, like you said, kind of building a nature habit. We talk a lot about habits in the classroom on the podcast. We talk about repetition a lot, how important it is to do something regularly. So it's not as important to do these kind of big, grandiose experiences. Yes, those are awesome. But if we want to build a habit of mental health, if we want to work on our mental hygiene and our emotional hygiene, it's best if it's kind of realistic sized and lengthed activities that we do often and then that really helps with student engagement and also with classroom management as the teacher, because whenever we're doing something novel, it is always more challenging to manage the classroom. It's more challenging to manage the students and expectations. But when we start making it a routine, then they know what the expectations are because we've been doing it once a month or once a week or every day. So those expectations are there, and we spend so much less time on managing their behaviors and we get right into it. So yes, those first couple times that you maybe read outside or do math class outside, it's going to be more work, but as you do it more often, that effort is going to go down because it'll be more normal for students.
Yeah. And it's very similar to the concept of mindfulness. And really, the best way to reap the most benefits from nature is to incorporate mindfulness, because you can be outside standing in a forest, but if you're not focusing on it, it won't help you. It's like this medicine that's there for you, but we just have to open our eyes and our ears and really absorb it all in a way that is going to be beneficial to us. If you're doing mindfulness anyway, that's a great way to incorporate visualization or just going outside to do a mindful moment as opposed to in the classroom.
Yeah, definitely. One really easy mindfulness practice that teachers can try is just bring your students outside and do a 5 senses activity. So literally you can be sitting down, lying down, walking, whatever makes sense for you. I really like to start this by having my students just lie on their backs and looking at the sky, because you can do that in any season and you don't need a lot of space for it. And you don't even need to have access to a lot of greenery or nature. If you are at a school where the building is in a very urban area and it's not very green, at least you can look at the sky and really pay attention to that part of nature. So having your kids lying on their backs, looking at the sky, and then asking them to notice something that they've never noticed before, using their 5 senses. So what's one thing you see that you've never noticed before? What's one thing you hear that you've never noticed before? Smell, things like that. And then afterwards, it's really fun to have a discussion to see how they felt about the activity. Oftentimes, students are really amazed by how much more they noticed that they'd never paid attention to before, that they'd always ignored before. Or I like to ask them, okay, try to hear 5 different animal sounds. So, that we'll kind of just sit in silence for 5 minutes and they're totally engaged trying to hear these different sounds and figure out what animal is making that sound, and then not being able to believe like, wow, there's so many little things that I never noticed before. So that's a very low effort activity for teachers. You need to do no prep, just go outside.
Yeah. And if you have a writing or poetry lesson, that's also something great. I've been on a nature poetry walk, and it's exactly what you said, where we were asked to really focus on our observations based on our senses and then write about them and do it in nature. Had about 20 minutes, 30 minutes to just pour out whatever came. And then you share, and it's really fascinating. It's relaxing. It's a creative exercise. They could write short stories. It's a way to really get the children to express what they've experienced.
Yeah, definitely. Another thing that comes to mind would be like discussions. So, if you're doing an activity, maybe it doesn't make sense for you to have the whole activity outside and some of the teaching needs to happen in class. Well, maybe if you want to end the class with some sort of discussion, you do the last 5-10 minutes of class time outside and you have that discussion outdoors. I find that sometimes students are more willing to open up just in an outdoor space than they would be in the classroom. It's something about, change of environment. It feels or they feel less pressure. Or you can have them, if you're having them do think, pair, share type of idea where they're pairing up in groups and sharing their ideas. It can be maybe less awkward for them to walk and talk rather than just like sitting still and looking at each other in the face. So you can say, okay, let's do like a lap of the schoolyard, and we'll keep walking for 5 minutes, discuss whatever it is you want to discuss for the full 5 minutes, and it just takes a bit of pressure off. And then you get to do it outside and get some movement in too.
That's great. And yeah, they found that works really well for children in therapy as well, the whole walk and talk with the doc. And so, especially if you're working on an issue that may be a little bit challenging or emotional, that would be a great tool to try with the kids. I like that.
That's such a great idea. That makes so much sense that works well for therapy. I always have the best talks with my mom when we're walking together. we walk the dogs after supper when we're at the cabin and we just have the best chat. So it makes sense. Something about walking opens you up emotionally.
Yeah. And I guess you're not just staring at the person, you're looking all around at the beautiful nature. So it's a positive distraction that helps you open up more for sure.
Yeah, totally. So you have a new book. Let's talk about your book and how it can support teachers and parents.
Yeah. So the whole book is organized by a lot of these different positive psychology tools through a nature lens. So, for example, I have a whole chapter on mindfulness. And in there, you'll first get the science behind why mindfulness in general is so beneficial, and then why incorporating nature into mindfulness is. And then I walk you through all kinds of activities that you could do, some more appropriate than for schools than others. And, but, so there's mindfulness chapter one about food. So we get into a lot of with gardening, and other ways to connect to food related areas, animals, of course. And I was going to say that, animals are a great way to add to the classroom, whether it's, a day of bringing in, a reptile show or another idea. They have these library dog reading programs that have been known to allow the children to kind of get over their fears of reading. So I thought that would be something really great to add to a classroom or to the school library program. I talk about gratitude practice. And that is also, a habit that is very important. I try to write in my gratitude journal every night because it just puts things in a better perspective. No matter how bad your day is, you can find something you're grateful for. And, I dive into volunteerism. And, I go into all kinds of examples of volunteer projects you can do that involve nature. And a lot of them are, if you're looking for field trips, ideas, or community service projects at the school at all ages, at all levels, depending on where you live. And, if you're near the beach, you could do a beach cleanup or, a lake cleanup, a park cleanup. You could volunteer at a local farm. There's really so many options. There's activity checklists at the end of each chapter so that you can make that your bucket list. And
love that. Teachers love checklists.
And there's just endless ideas, again, from citizen science, which are programs that kids can get involved in science projects and at all ages. And a lot of those just involve signing up for an app, and then they go out and they might count the number of birds and the types of birds in the schoolyard. And, this is a great way to incorporate into your curriculum. And then also, nature clubs. Every school should have a nature club. That's how I got my interest really, not until high school, but that nature defense club was had a huge impact on my life and the trajectory of my life. So that's something to think about starting at your school as well.
That's so great. So your book is called Finding Ecohappiness, Fun Nature Activities to Help Your Kids Feel Happier and Calmer. Where can people find your book?
Yeah, so it's everywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, really everywhere now. And I also want to just put a plug in for, I also co-authored a children's book, actually with a teacher who has a specialty in social emotional learning. And it's called Sky's Search for Ecohappiness. And I thought this was so critical that along with the parenting book or the nonfiction book, which isn't just for parents, it's for teachers too, and other caretakers of kids. But the children's book allows that conversation to start with the children at a younger age, because it's about a little girl who's feeling blue, and her mom suggests that she goes outside and see what her friends are up to. And as she meets each one, they're doing something very calming that involves nature, such as painting a sunset, some outdoor yoga, walking the dog. So, it's a really great way to stimulate the conversation. And I would just also say that any books involving nature are, great to incorporate into the curriculum and to encourage kids to read those books, and especially before bedtime, because it helps them calm down and sleep better when they're relaxed.
And that is always useful, always helpful to find ways to relax before falling asleep.
Maybe it just don't, depends if they have nap time in school, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You don't want to get them too sleepy, I guess, in the middle of the day.
Well, these sound like awesome resources for teachers and parents. Both of these books sound like they're going to be so helpful. Thank you so much for sharing such great ideas with us today for how we can bring nature practices into the classroom, into our schools in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming, and starting to build that nature habit.
Yeah. And for all kinds of resources, including blog posts and other articles I've written and some free giveaways, just head over to ecohappinessproject.com. And I think you'll appreciate, the resources there, and maybe try some real out of the box nature activities.
I love it. It's always fun. That's another way to improve or bring on some joy, is trying something new. Awesome. So we will link to your book and your website and everything you've mentioned today in our show notes at educalm.com/TBE159. So that's educalm.com, spelled EDUCALME.com/TBE as in the Balanced Educator 159. Thank you so much, Sandi, for being on the podcast with us today. We appreciate you and everything that you shared with our community.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.